an important part of preparedness for Portugal, obviously, is speaking the language. And I think we're all agreed, are we not, that some effort to learn the language is a good thing. And then it becomes interesting, doesn't it? And what I'd like to say, I'd like to tell a bit of a story, really, based around spiritual cod, if that's not too strange. There it is. This is the meal that I had yesterday, a prato do dia, and also had a rather nice dessert as well. There's a saying in catering and restaurants, isn't there? It's all about the presentation. That was delicious. It came in a little plastic pot, and it had a really old sort of 70s spoon. I was in a greasy spoon, as we would call them in the UK. It's rather impolite and it's not very nice to call the dining establishment a greasy spoon. I think in Portugal they're also known as the smudged glass cafes. So you've got a thumbprint on your glass when you get it. So the my Superbot glass there may well have had a thumbprint on it when it arrived with my Imperial. But what I want to say about this, and hopefully connect it to the whole idea of being prepared to speak some Portuguese here in Portugal, is what happened, what occurred to me by the end of the meal and as I was leaving the restaurant. And so to begin with, I was in Lisbon. I was going to the airport, and I was picking up a hire car, picking up a friend of Luisa's, who's now a friend of mine, I'd like to say. And all of that mission was accomplished. Now, there was a moment between picking up the hire car and picking up the friend from the airport. So I thought, hold on a minute, didn't I speak to Tracy O'Connor a little while ago about the skull of St. Bridget bear with me, in Lumiar, which is a little suburb of Lisbon near the airport. So I was thinking, okay, I've got a couple of hours. I'll go and have a look at the skull of St. Bridget and report back to Tracy and say, I've been to St. John the Baptist Church in Lumiar. And yes, it's amazing, Tracy. That's how I imagined it to be. And it was as it turned out like that. Bear with. That time I got to the cough button a bit sooner than I did last time. Right. So I did that. And there's a video to follow about St. Bridget's skull, which I believe has been in Lisbon for safekeeping since 1263. It was brought here by two anonymous knights who died soon after, I think, or certainly their identities are not known, having brought the skull of St. Bridget of Kildare, is it? I think the matron saint of Ireland, Patrick being the patron saint, of course, and Bridget being the matron saint. And she's very, I would say, increasingly important. And Tracy, I interviewed Tracy. We talked about it here on this show, and we talked about it on the show I do with Louisa at midday the moment on New Reality TV. So yeah, great. And I went to Lumiar to do that, and I had a great time. And unfortunately, the church shut for lunch. Got to have earthly nourishment as well as spiritual nourishment. Now, when I first parked up looking for Lumiar, I was actually, turns out I was quite a long way away from the church, but it was around 1 o'clock. So I thought I better have some lunch. And I parked up the car, and the usual thing in Lisbon, do I have to pay here? Am I going to get towed away? What's the deal? Is this resident parking? What is it? And I put a parking ticket on the car and then made my way across the road to what I thought was a little area where there might be one of those little tashkas or a cafe. And indeed there was. And as I trod the moist calçada, being mindful not to slip over on the more hilly bits, of course, Lisbon's built on 7 hills, is it not? And it can be little bit slippery on the calçada. And if you've got your trainers on and your sort of plastic soled shoes, I'm thinking, I'm going to go elbow over apex here if I don't watch out. I'm going to follow my nose and find somewhere to eat. And there was a little bit of a kind of trendy cafe. And as soon as the word cocktails is mentioned, I've got nothing against cocktails, but if I'm looking for a tashka and it says cocktails, that's not my place. The tashka is going to have an A board outside with some barely legible chalk writing telling you what there is to eat. And lo and behold, just around the corner was one of these places. And I could just about make out from the hieroglyphics on the A board, bacalhau espiritual, spiritual bacalhau, spiritual cod, everybody. And I thought, it's time. And there was a lovely coincidence because I was on the search of Bridget's skull, the holy relic of Ireland. And it seemed only right. I mean, the only thing missing was it wasn't Fishy Friday. It was Wednesday yesterday. But I thought, okay, that's a really lovely coincidence. I was on a bit of a spiritual journey looking for Bridget's skull, so I'll have the spiritual cod. I walk in, and it truly was a smudgy glass place. I mean, it was a little bit grim, actually. It was the infrastructure was a little tired, and I don't think there's any other word for it. It was a bit dirty. The floor was unswept. Maybe there'd been, it had been quite windy and the rains. I mean, my front garden looks the same at the moment, all this wind and rain. But it did look like it'd seen better days. And it looked like it was, how do I put this? Immune boosting as an establishment. But I was thinking to myself, there's a lot of Portuguese people in here. They're obviously having their lunch and no one's died or been hospitalized, it would appear, in recent times. Otherwise, this place would be empty. So I thought, okay, let's do it. Let's do this. Let's boost the immune system. It wasn't the most sparkling and hygienic of looking places, I would say. Not that that's ever put me off in the past, but that did occur to me. It flashed through my mind. And so I'm in there. It's pretty packed. It's lunchtime, and I think the Portuguese people, the culture, is fairly disciplined when it comes to the fire test signals going off. Ha! It's lunchtime. The bomberos are letting us know it's lunchtime. It's midday in my town, and it's 1 o'clock in Caldas. And I imagine it's probably varies around, but it's around lunchtime, isn't it? And so it's packed, and the theme was football, because we were very near the Alvalade Stadium, the Lisbon Sporting Stadium. And there were football scarves of every kind. Bit of a football thing, definitely a mum and pop vibe, and a great bloke who kind of, I think he saw me. I sat in a singleton table, the Billy No Mates. There's often a little Billy No Mates table, isn't there, in a cafe, where there's a little bit of space, and to make best use of the space, to stick one table in there with one place setting, and that was me yesterday. And I thought I was going to do a little bit of work on my laptop. Didn't have time for that. I had a menu thrust into my hand, but I knew what I wanted, so I said to the guy, bacalhau, faz favor, see bacalhau, and over it came. Spiritual bacalhau, there it is on the screen there, and it was delicious. It has carrot in it. It's a bit like a bacalhau brush, but a bit drier. Obviously, there are hundreds of bacalhau recipes. I think this is a known one, and it's historical reference. If you look it up, bacalhau spiritual, it dates back, and it's a very particular recipe, and it had the obligatory tomato, sweet onion, and lettuce combo of salad, which I like. I don't eat all the onion because I find that repeats on me for the rest of the day, even if it's very mild. I can't eat onions that are raw. Love them, but they don't work for me. And you can see the obligatory. Is it a cruet in out of focus in the distance there? Oh, and that's the A board outside, actually, from which you could choose your selections. I know alheira was on there as well. Funnily enough, we were talking about alheira last night, the chicken sausage. But I had to go for the spiritual cod. I splashed some of the dressing, the vinegar, and the olive oil onto my salad, and it was blooming delicious. And then a little bit later on, he said, para beber, and I said, yeah, imperial, faz favor, pequeño. Well, just a little beer to go with my, oh no, that's something else. We never solved that mystery, did we? What is that? Going back to the meal I had yesterday, by the way, and believe it or not, this is turning a bit Ronnie Corbett, but this is all about my thoughts on speaking and learning Portuguese. So I ordered an imperial. That came. Really enjoyed that with my main course. And then he shouted across sobremesa to me while he was serving. It was really fantastic multitasking. He was taking orders. He was taking money. He was delivering food. Really tight operation. And I said, "Tem arroz doce? Have you got a rice pudding?" No arroz doce. Tem Serradura. That's what I had. That's the sawdust pud, isn't it? I don't think I've had that before. If I had, I've forgotten about it. Sounds good. Serradura, faz favor. And there was the casa, sobremesa de casa, I think. But I thought Serradura is what I picked out and heard. And Serradura, faz favor. It's blooming delicious. It was in a plastic pot, and it had the cutlery with plastic on the handles, from quite sort of 70s and 80s, but bright red plastic around a stainless steel spoon, and that was the sort of hallmark of the cafe. You know where you are. The obligatory paper tablecloth, really delicious. Rocked up to the bar. Eventually, I wanted to leave, but if people kept coming in, I was thinking, "There's no point standing up. Yeah, I won't be able to pay." But I did get up, and because I thought it was time to carry on and go about my mission in Lisbon. Posso pagar 9.50, paid with a card. He was doing that while he was serving other people. And I said, muito obrigado, muito prazer. And we did the not a conventional handshake. What's it called? The, hands together, muito prazer. And there was a moment of brotherhood. And as I walked with a full belly, I also had this great sense of cultural fulfillment as well. I had an entirely Portuguese interaction. And I suspect, I don't know, I might be sort of blowing my own trumpet and blowing smoke up the orifice, as it were. But I thought to myself, I may have been mistaken for a Portuguese person in there. And if not a Portuguese person, someone with a good enough grasp of Portuguese to survive and order my lunch. And I thought, that's it for me. That's what I've always wanted ever since I saw Michael Heron ordering lunch about 7 years ago. And it really impressed me. And that was my benchmark in that moment. I thought, clever bugger. He can speak to the waiter. I don't understand a word he's saying, but some lovely food emerged in Aroeira, or just outside Aroeira. It's fantastic. Another traditional Portuguese establishment. And I thought, that's what I want to do. That's what I'd like to be able to do here. And so it looks like I have. It looks like after all this time, I've managed to do that and go in and out of a Portuguese cafe at lunchtime, understand what's on order my food, eat my food, make a choice that isn't just a blind panic choice of, I'll have that, pointing to something, or just looking all forlorn, and an old lady coming to help and who speaks a bit of French or English. It was a completely seamless and wonderful Portuguese experience. So I reached my benchmark that I set. I don't know if I set it very consciously, but that's what I wanted to be and do when I saw Michael Heron do it, and I can do it. And compare and contrast that with something else, a confession. So that's my observation. Here's my confession. I hear of people who do A1 and A2, and I understand that they want to do it for their citizenship. But they can't speak Portuguese. They couldn't have done what I did yesterday. There are people who just have a panic attack, who've been going to Portuguese for twice a week for 12 years or whatever you have to do to get the A1 or A2. 5 times a week for 6 hours a day for 12 years. And then you get an A1 or A2 certificate. I'm exaggerating to make a point here. But those people often, they're telling me they've done A1 and A2, and they sit next to me at the meetup. And then, somebody comes over to take their order. It's like, a beer, please, and some chips, hoping that the waiter will speak English. And it's like, wow, that's interesting. And I'm not judging them. It's fine. You do what you got to do. You do you, I'll do me. But it's very interesting, isn't it, to note that the official route to learning the language often doesn't empower people with the confidence to speak the language, or give them the necessary to survive, really, in Portuguese, that is. And the other part of it, it's not a benchmark exactly, but my other limitation, my other boundary is I realized I don't want to be fluent. And my confession here is I don't want to understand what people are saying around me. So I could speak enough Portuguese to order my lunch, but I don't know enough Portuguese to eavesdrop on the people next to me. And my reason for that is I left the UK because of being in a culture that I thought was quite miserable and whingy. And I realized that's just that's human condition. That's humanity. That's not just the Brits. That's wherever you go. And because I can speak English and understand English, I can hear what people are saying. And I don't want to hear all their moaning and negativity. And I suspect if I learn fluent Portuguese, I'll hear Portuguese people moaning about stuff that I don't want to hear. So I think that's where I'm going to just kind of park my linguistic bike, if you like, enough to survive, enough to have a basic conversation. But I don't want to hear the ins and outs of how terrible life is of people sat next to me on buses and trains and in cafes. Am I wrong? Is that bad? Let me know in the chat. I've talked too long here. Let's bring Veronica on, see what she has to say about it. And as part of Portugal Preparedness Week, I've got a really great question for Veronica and for Carl and for you. If you had to choose your forever home as in, well, because if you're choosing your forever home, you're choosing your forever place. Where would it be? Where would you choose to live if you had to live in one place for the rest of your life? Let's bring her on. Nice big round of applause.